real goal in this. It's going to turn us into a dialogue. Anyone wants to know about China?
Cool.
All right. Well, evening everyone. My name is Ryon Castro. Got kind of wrangled into this from my friend John Rubino for a long time. He's always been an asshole. But like I was just saying, we're going to turn this more into a dialogue than a straightforward presentation. It's kind of a last minute thing. So just going to field some questions about Bitcoin in China, the future of it, the history of it, and how it's going to affect the cryptocurrency the world over, and we're going to keep it going. I believe this one,
Yeah.
Will, right?
Napoleon.
Napoleon.
Yeah.
I will.
All right.
You could tell, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the companies that you're met with out there, that BTC China, or how the different exchanges are viewed natively versus by us.
I didn't do any much liaison. Bitcoin was sort of a side interest of mine as I was doing education.
Okay.
Yeah, that was more my field, but I did use it. It was very convenient to get money across to pay American bills, but isn't how it relates to OKCoin.
Oh yeah, I was actually, I didn't know exactly what your exposure was, or if you were over there for business or
Yeah. No, it wasn't solely based on currency or economic that kind of thing. It was more purely for educational purposes. English education, of course, but I did use it much to my avail. So
maybe just tell us what your interaction was with Bitcoin.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask, is the average Chinese person more aware or less aware of Bitcoin than the average American?
the average Chinese person is more aware of it. There's a much greater focus on how to best take advantage of that, because that's really hard to describe. The average Chinese person is, there's much more of an online engagement, particularly in terms of dealing with money, except for actual credit. Like, we're gonna have to worry more about getting normal credit involved in China, because that's not a thing. Most of the time it's used by cash. Like, almost every sort of exchange, monetary exchange, is gonna be based on cash. And businesses, McDonald's doesn't accept credit cards in China, so it's gonna be hard to get cryptocurrency accepted in major retailers over there. But the average individual is more interested in using it. Anyone with a moderate affluence, which is of course getting larger and larger as time goes on in China. So definitely yes.
Well, the businesses take the credit card.
There's credit's not really caught on, and even major lending practices are hard to manage because different provinces have different legalities, different rules. So if you were to take out an exorbitant amount, maybe let's say 1 million Chinese yuan, and in Beijing province, and you were to move to Hebei or Henan, there's really no legal precedent to actually have you pay your debt in a different province. So there's no way for credit companies, lenders to really make a profit. Really what they're going to, because it's just, there's no oversight in that, because all municipalities are much more independent. Even though it's centered over the higher government, there's a lot of infighting and bickering, and everyone's always passing the buck through Chinese government. And so anyone that can take responsibility for something else, they're going to let it not be their problem, which means, of course, nothing gets done. And so if you have too much that you can't get out, you can basically start another life and not worry about that kind of credit. So people are very reluctant to get credit moving in China because it's so hard to enforce.
So essentially, they could just get credit different provinces. Go bounce around and be like, oh, you can't do anything here.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah, each province has its own
So the
laws.
risk isn't even worth it, don't even get into it.
Pretty much, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your overall experience with Chinese culture and language? Like,
Just overall,
yeah, like, just so I know, like, have an idea how reliable, how much to rely on what you're saying, you know?
absolutely fair. Well, I mean, everyone's opinion is going to be subjective, of course, including something as large as Bitcoin is going to be in the future. My personal experience, I don't know. I don't really have any sort of degree in Chinese economics, so you would have to take my word for whatever you feel like my word is worth.
Well, how well do you speak the language?
I would probably at conversational fluency. I wouldn't be able to talk about Chopin and his influence on the rest of
Okay.
classical music and philosophy, but spend a good amount of time talking to average people and what their sort of interests are.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Good, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell you how to order kung pao chicken in Chinese if you want.
What did you do in China?
What I do in China, I was a teacher and a curriculum developer for a private kindergarten. So I worked in facilitating communication and also talking to parents, as well as teaching 2 to 5 year olds. So when I wasn't talking to kids, which always have more interesting things to say than most people anyway, I was trying to. I can't really get Bitcoin going over there outside of the expat community because that wasn't really. I didn't spend a lot of time doing that, but I was able to communicate with people who were trying to do business in China, people who own businesses, people who are trying to get it going within themselves. But like I said, it's hard because the average Chinese citizen doesn't deal much with credit, so it's all based on cash. Only foreigners use cards mostly.
Did China ban Bitcoin?
China didn't ban Bitcoin. No, it's still trading. It's still very healthy, but of course, it's not going to get past $1,230. I think was the high last year on December 5th, I think. And it's not banned, no, but it's much harder to get into because there was a time when you could, of course, buy Bitcoin directly. You could, barring that, do an instant bank transfer to BTC China through Bank of China or Merchants Bank, even Bank of Communications. Now that's not as feasible. It's not even really an option. You have to do through individual voucher resellers. The BTC China will do Bitcoin vouchers worth so much Chinese yuan. And you have to buy those through people on QQ, which is sort of like Chinese AIM.
Oh, yeah, just graduated.
So it's still functional, but it's a little more tricky to get into, especially as a foreigner if your written Chinese isn't as good because it's all, of course, online. And so spoken Chinese is almost entirely different from written Chinese.
How much did you use it there? Did you end up using it all, or like?
Through personal merchant transactions, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not to that level yet.
Did you settle any bills with other people, or did you ever do interpersonal type of thing, or?
Yeah, of course, between people in my circle and between individuals throughout other countries, and even in Hong Kong, I would deposit money into my account and use that to draw through a Hong Kong ATM because Hong Kong is, of course, still technically mainland China, but its laws are also entirely different. So Hong Kong is much more accepting of Bitcoin. They have Bitcoin ATMs in many locations throughout Hong Kong, and so I would use that there to withdraw money, and that made it much easier, as opposed to converting Chinese yuan into Hong Kong dollars. I could just convert Bitcoin into Hong Kong dollars, or vice versa. Yes.
Well, in United States, the Bitcoin world is known for being full of really horrendous, ridiculous scams. Like, can you give us a comparison for China on that issue?
Oh, China's based on scams.
Yeah, I know, but is Bitcoin worse even than that? Or is it just a normal way to scam people?
I would say it's another way to scam people.
Okay.
But of course, I've had tremendous success through BTC China, and through, of course, Bobby Lee has always been very upfront, very open about everything that has been going on that's been affecting his company. And but in China, there's a saying, and it doesn't just affect foreigners, it affects basically everyone. It goes, 能骗就骗, which means if you can trick somebody, then trick them.
It's harsh.
I know, and it sounds really terrible, but it's basically like that everywhere. The only difference is China is, of course, much more open to surreptitiousness than I think maybe we are in the States, even though we don't have that much of a problem with it. But it's less of an issue cognitively to take someone's money. And so any less reputable Bitcoin merchant, website or bank or vault, I would be really suspicious of depositing Bitcoin there. Yes, you had a question.
Yeah, so on that, do Bitcoin users in China generally understand that you need to have your private key kept private to yourself, otherwise you don't actually own the Bitcoins?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Chinese are also very private as a general rule anyway, and so they're going to be very protective of.
That's one way to help yourself from
Exactly.
getting scammed.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to make sweeping generalizations, but as much as people say that the East is, very collectivist culture, it is and it isn't. Sort of if you're outside of the integral family unit, there's really no way to trust what anyone else is telling you. Because haggling, we don't haggle in the West. Like we go to any sort of retail outlet and say, how much is this? Okay, here you go. But a markup anywhere in China is going to be at least six times higher than a profit margin would be made. So people are expecting sort of incongruity with price and value. Yes.
So I know that they censor a lot of the media, and a lot of Americans think Bitcoin is just a scam. And if scams are really prevalent in China, wouldn't it be harder to convince them that it's not a scam, since they're kind of like, it's hard to trust anyone, plus your internet is kind of censored and your media is kind of censored, or are they can get around all that and figure out what's really going on,
Options are available. For instance, I purchased a VPN while I was over there, and I could use banned sites like Facebook and Twitter, even though I don't really Twitter. Those options are there, but sort of when you're raised in a Confucian culture like that, it's hard to see like, well, it's not there, so I don't even need to look at it. And as far as that sort of effect on Bitcoin, I think because it's not been outright banned and people are still interested in how they can capitalize on that to improve their own current situation, I don't see it affecting it that much, other than, like I said, the direct availability of being able to do it customer to bank as opposed to customer to customer to customer to bank to get the value out of that. Yeah.
How many of these exchanges do you think are playing fractional reserve games, like selling Bitcoins they don't actually have deposits for and stuff like that?
Probably not as many as you might suspect, but also I think that's because I would venture to guess that about 70% of the Bitcoin transactions going on in China are through OKCoin or BTC China, things like that. So a lot of smaller ones are getting some play, but it's certainly not going to be as big of a debacle as the MTGOX was fairly recently.
Because your motto that you expressed for was like, if you can cheat someone, cheat. Fractional reserve on exchanges is the obvious place to cheat, to get people to keep their coins on the exchange and then go fractional.
I don't see that being a tremendous concern. I mean, of course, you're just going to have to sort of look at reputation, the history about any reserve that are going to potentially dabble in that surreptitious practice. But I wouldn't count that as an overriding concern for investing in it as a Chinese citizen or as somebody who is investing in a Chinese owned and operated Bitcoin market.
Is there a lot of coming, is there the same amount going into the exchanges as there? That would, I mean,
Why don't we call them up and ask them?
Yeah,
Actually,
might ask
one
Bobby Lee
of
about
the
that.
guys, like the Firecoin one, oh boy, they did Greg Maxwell's proof of reserve thing recently. I'm not sure that people actually checked up on it, but they did.
What do people most like about Bitcoin in China?
That it's not so it's not as restrictable as many other forms of currency, even though in China there's rampant what's the word, counterfeiting. If anything can be made and sold cheaper in China, it will be, and it can be, because you can exchange dollars. You can exchange your dollars at the bank for a market fee, or you can go to the guy on the street who's giving you 1% and probably giving you fake 100 yuan bills. But it doesn't matter because most places are going to accept fake bills anyway. Not fake American hundreds, but they're worth about $16. 100 Chinese yuan to American dollars is about 16 to 1.6. But so should we repeat the question?
What do they like about Bitcoin? What are their features that they're most interested in?
Well, that it can't be counterfeited.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's the most obvious response, but like really that's essentially it, that it can't be counterfeited, and they can use that to, while it can't be counterfeited, the money that goes into it can be.
Also, capital controls, I would imagine. Like getting money out of the country is pretty difficult, right?
It's fairly difficult. It's the largest network that's being used. China is opening its own Visa, which is more or less Union Pay, and almost all banks in China are using Union Pay, and so it's acceptable in almost every Asian country. And even if you like Wells Fargo and Chase Bank here are using Union Pay, but that was the easiest way that I found to get money out of the country, as opposed to trying to ship. But you can transfer, I believe a Chinese national can transfer something like $50,000 American worth a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a little bit more prohibitive depending on the scale that you're going for. So of course the Chinese government is going to want to stamp down a little bit on that, because they don't like Chinese money leaving China. It's a long-term game that Chinese government is playing to get 2050, 2100, or 2100. So China's like a dominant leading force, and so they're really trying to keep the infrastructure inside, which is of course not the best option, but it's the option that they're using. So as a way of getting currency out, it's available, but like I said, after the inability to do direct transactions, it's a little more difficult. Yes.
What is the income inequality like in China?
Egregious. I was making, just as a rough comparison to my own personal classroom, I had 3 Chinese teachers assisting me at any given time, and they were making 2,000 RMB a month or less, usually about 15. The more skilled, more English fluent teachers were making about 2,500 RMB a month, and I was making just over 12,000. And that's 12,000. It's 600 to 1. So 600 Chinese RMB is $100 American. So I was making just over $2,000 a month. And my assistants, 3 of them working alongside me, were making under $300 a month. So yeah, it's not very good. The average college graduate is looking at about $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Chinese professors make $6,000 a month. Beijing University, Daxue is university. We're making about $1,000 a month just from the university.
What about like the cost of living compared to that?
It would depend on where you were. If you're in a more foreign part of town, apartments could run close to $1,000 a month. I lived more in the north, and so I was able to get by on much less. Street food, you can buy food on the street for about 50 cents. 50 cents per meal, or you can sit down in a nice restaurant for 50 to 100. Just sort of depends.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? What time we got?
That's right around 8 o'clock.
Okay, awesome. Well, going once. Going twice. Thank you guys for letting me speak and preach to the choir a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.